hockey. This is not Nam. This is bowling. There are rules.
Today, Junior! America!
Steak.
For breakfast! So stand by.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Steak for Breakfast podcast. I'm Roan. I'll be your host for the next couple hours. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the show. If you're a long-time listener, welcome back to America's fastest-growing and quickly becoming favorite political podcast on a very busy News Tuesday. Guys, make sure you're subscribed to the show. We're available across every downloadable podcasting platform. We prefer Apple and Spotify. Follow for free. Make sure it's downloading to your electronic device. Rate the show 5 stars, and please write a review. You can also check us out on social media as well. We're on all of them, but are most active on X. We've also got some new YouTube channels. Check them out. Subscribe there as well. And, well, if you're hearing this show for the first time, don't worry. We'll see you in just a bit. Press pause. Go check out our first edition of Steak for Breakfast today. Episode 588 featured Pennsylvania Congressman Scott Perry and North Carolina Representative Brad Knott. We talked about the start of President Trump's historic trip to the Middle East, beginning in Saudi Arabia. And then we brought you the latest from the New Jersey ICE Detention Center that was stormed by Democrats last Friday. We're going to be jumping into things today on this edition of the podcast, talking about President Trump making some major announcements regarding the cost of prescription drugs and why it's going to be drastically lowered. And then how the Trump administration has also struck the initial phases of a mutual trade deal with China. Looks like they wanted to play chicken with President Trump and blinked, and how we got to that point as well. Major other stuff going on outside of that. We'll try to catch you up on all of it. This is going to be a volunteer edition of Steak for Breakfast, if you know what I mean. We're going to have a dueling Tennessee congressman joining us, Tim Burchett. At the end of this segment, we'll wrap up our second edition of Steak for Breakfast with Representative Andy Ogles, who's fresh off a trip back from El Salvador. We visited the CCOT facility down there, met with President Bukele, talked about a lot of things, including trade. And then he was in the UK on the heels of that historic first new trade deal signed by President Trump in England last week. So lots of stuff going on. I already mentioned at the top of our first podcast how busy I am at home, but hey, how about my Knicks? I don't know if there's any NBA fans out there. You know, I was away for so long, and it was a combination of a lot of things. I know the NBA had gotten, well, number one, completely woke. Number two, the game has changed from when I was little and really enjoying it. If you watched professional basketball in the late 80s and early 90s, and that's where you fell in love with the game and the stars that represented it around that time, it was, much like in the case of the Attitude Era and WWE, the golden age, I believe, of that professional sport. The game has changed so much, you know, so many three-pointers, less physical, not big men driven. And yeah, my little Knicks, who got through the first round in 5 games beating the Pistons, now have the Boston Celtics without their best player, who apparently ruptured an Achilles last night. Tatum from the Celtics on the ropes, 3-1. So in a 7-game series, 3 games remaining, the Knicks already have 3 wins. You need 1 to advance. I don't see them going 0-3 without the Celtics having who arguably is their best player out there. That guy's going to miss the rest of this series and probably a good portion of next year as well. See, that's an injury that requires pretty much a year of rehab. Doesn't matter how good of an athlete you are following surgery and all that other stuff. So you hate to see professional athletes go down in that fashion. I mean, I was watching the Yankee game last night, who, again, they're tearing it up right now. Just won a series against Oakland. Now they're up 1-0 against Seattle. You know, someone who, and again, I've talked about this. I hate that the Yankees, under the ownership of George Steinbrenner's son, and under the continued general managership of Brian Cashman, have just gotten into, we're only going to spend as much money as we need to spend to win the shitty American League East and the even shittier American League in its totality and make it to the World Series. And then, you know, we'll play baseball. It's a stat-driven sport. It's not a physical sport. So this, that, and the other thing. We all know how well that worked out in conjunctions with the Yankees manager's Brett Boone's horrible decisions he made in the World Series, leading to the eventual loss to the Dodgers last year. But, man, there was a horrific ankle fracture last night. Yankees, not third baseman, but playing third baseman because, like I just said, they don't spend money anymore and bring in relevant players. Oswaldo Cabrera rounded third on a base hit, I believe, by Aaron Judge. And when Cabrera crossed the plate, he slid. He planted his lead foot in to slide across the plate, and it stood in the dirt, and the rest of his body kept on moving. By the time it was over, his foot was pointing in the opposite direction of it goes, and they had to bring an ambulance onto the field and get him off. So thoughts and prayers to him as well, but that's neither here nor there. It's just a good time right now to be a New York, New Jersey sports fan. I mean, the Rangers suck balls, but they just brought in a good coach, the guy who led the Pittsburgh Penguins to consecutive Stanley Cups about a decade ago, who's highly revered throughout the leagues. The Rangers always have good coaches. They always put a good team together. They're good for a year, and then they fall apart. I don't know why that's the case, but it just seems to be the way things are with them. But the Yankees are, back on top of the American League this year. I'm sure they'll pick up a couple pieces to get themselves over the finish line, at least get into the playoffs and make a run at a World Series. Obviously, the Knicks are one game away from the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 25 years, so you can tell how hard it's been being a New York basketball fan for about half of my life now. And, the New York Football Giants don't really like their GM. Not a huge fan of their coach. They absolutely sucked last year. But they did win the NFL draft this year. And the future, at least in the long term, looks bright. I think they're still going to – I looked at their schedule, which came out yesterday. I thought I saw like 3 guaranteed wins on there. All of them were like on the back half of the season, and that's not if people are getting hurt and missing extended amounts of time. So, but the Knicks and Yankees being great at the same time is something that takes me back to my childhood. Is the Knicks made multiple NBA final appearances in the 90s, and the Yankees won 5 World Series when I was a younger man as well. So the best part about it is allowing my son to fall in love with these sports. I sent him to school today with his Win It for the Burrows, the player T-shirts that the bench players have on during the game. I got him one, and he wears it to school all proudly. So it's pretty cool getting to have my little guy fall in love with basketball. And he even said it to me a couple games ago. We were watching the game in the afternoon, I think before baseball practice, and he's like, "This is awesome. Why haven't we ever watched basketball together before?" I was like, "Son, they have sucked for a really long time. So it's just one of those things where I don't think you would want to invest in something that's as horrible as that." I was like, "You already have hard enough time liking the Giants, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, but I can go back and watch the videos of like Eli Manning beating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, and the Giants used to have really good defenses when you were a little dad." And I said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "But you watch it now, and as a fan, you want results." But I tell you what, my son puts on his 5950 New York Giants hat and wears it to school during the football season, and he doesn't even care. We live in San Diego, so the Chargers have always sucked. And that's just what he says to people who give him shit about being a New York fan. But I have planted those seeds, and I believe that he will stick in the New York state of mind. And when he becomes a dad and has kids of his own, he will lay those seeds, and it'll be something I will tell him he needs to pass along on my deathbed. He needs to make Sunday gravy and roll some meatballs and eat all the good Italian foods once I'm not here anymore, to make them all eat it. And he needs to keep in the thread of the New York teams and all the great memories he's had of watching those as a kid growing up to pass on as well. So, again, it's a busy time for the Trump administration. It's a busy time here on Steak for Breakfast. I can't believe we're actually catching up with 4 members of Congress today. They're traveling in from district to the Hill. Some are already there. They're having committee meetings for those who sit on the big 3, like ag and budget and ways and means. And, the news is really starting to say there are some cracks showing in the House Republican armor right now in regards to sticking together on this big, beautiful bill. My honest to God hope is that they will just do that and be able to get this over the finish line and then take the momentum of that victory into the start of the midterm election cycle, into the start of codification of President Trump's executive orders, and to complete a fiscal year 2026 budget to best serve the American people. And if it's not Congress running into issues of their own, it's issues that we're having with some of the things we rely heavily on, like prescription drugs here in America. Now, while RFK Jr. and his team of great accomplices are working hard to make America healthy again, President Trump took the initiative and ran with it, making a major announcement in the West Wing yesterday. We're going to lead in with this right now. Let's check it out.
But starting today, the United States will no longer subsidize the health care of foreign countries, which is what we were doing. We're subsidizing others' health care. Countries where they paid a small fraction of what, for the same drug, that what we pay many, many times more for. And will no longer tolerate profiteering and price gouging from Big Pharma. But again, it was really the countries that forced Big Pharma to do things that, frankly, I'm not sure they really felt comfortable doing. But they've gotten away with it, these countries. European Union has been brutal. And the drug companies actually told me stories. It was just brutal how they forced them. And European Union suing all our companies, Apple, Google, Meta. They're suing all of our companies. They end up, they have judges that are European Union-centric, and they get rewarded $15 billion, $17 billion, $20 billion, and they use that to run their operation. Not going to happen any longer.
No, it sure isn't. And what President Trump was explaining there, I'll just make it as simple as possible. Let's just say, I mean, he's going to give a really good example in our next audio clip in regards to his fat friend. But here's the deal. If, let's just say, Ozempic in the United States costs $1,200 a shot, which in a lot of instances it does. I believe it's between $800 and $1,200 for, you know, a package, which comes with like the EpiPen style thing and a couple of doses, right? $800 to $1,200 here in the United States. In other modernized countries throughout the world, the same exact drug from the same exact company is available for less than $100. Same dosage. Why? Because again, all of the industrialized and modernized nations rely on the United States to be the leader, and that includes regarding the payments of everything, while at the same time taking advantage of us in ways that many other leaders before President Trump chose to overlook. It can't be like that anymore. It's contributing to trade deficits. It's contributing to our national debt. It's contributing to the trade deficit. And President Trump wants it to be fair for everyone, free and fair markets. Again, President Trump, in the continuation of this announcement right now, would give you an example like I've kind of outlined there, talking about one of his longtime and close personal friends. Let's check it out.
I mean, I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine who's a businessman, very, very, very top guy. Most of you would have heard of him. A highly neurotic, brilliant businessman, seriously overweight, and he takes the fat shot drug. And he called me up, and he said, President, he calls me, he used to call me Donald, now he calls me President, so that's nice respect. But he's a rough guy, smart guy, very successful, very rich. I wouldn't even know how we would know this, but because he's got comments. President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working.
Oof.
He said, I just paid $88, and in New York I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on?
I love what the hell is going on. Don't you remember back to President Trump's first run for office when he would do those little, it was before TikTok, but it was like TikTok style videos that he would throw on Twitter. And he's like, I heard they're making an Indiana Jones and they're using a girl lead. What the hell is going on? You can't do that. I mean, the man hasn't changed. His narrative on certain things like China and Iran and free trade and stories of that nature, they are real, they are organic, and they are ones that he have told for a very long time. You know, and listen, before you even start to get into panic mode, because I know people freak out over healthcare and medication, the most because so many people in this country, unfortunately, rely on it for a lot of different things. But here's the deal. Just remember about 3 weeks ago, or maybe even a month, post-Liberation Day, when the mainstream media and all the Democrats said that President Trump's tariff stuff was going to tank the economy, spike inflation, ruin the stock market, and it's the end of the republic. All the normal shit they usually say. The stock markets are at all-time highs. The inflation report just came out. We've dropped another 0.3% in inflation to its lowest rates since 2021. Okay? The jobs numbers are up. The stock markets have all been through the roof and have now exceeded the numbers that President Trump was enjoying pre-Liberation Day. So again, President Trump was right. He's playing the long game. And even in the case where if the long game is a month or two, you have to be able to trust that process. You have to be able to know that he has the right people working on this. You have to understand, just in black and white, should a drug purchased here in the United States cost $1,300 when you could buy it in England for less than $100? No, it should not. It should not. And just because we have more money, because we consume more, that should have nothing to do with it. It should be the same price across the board for everybody, or it should be the same price ridiculously through the roof for everybody as well. And there can be no in between on this. This is access to health care. So everyone's going to come out and say that this announcement by President Trump to demand free and fair pricing for Americans in regards to the people that receive the same things across the world is going to be the end of available medication for everybody. They're going to say it's going to lead to so many jobs lost, factories shuttering, and raising the prices in other countries to the point to where it becomes inaccessible for them. Well, tough shit, because it keeps a lot of Americans house poor here. And I'm not talking about Ozempic. I'm talking about actual medications that people rely on and use, in addition to having to allocate their money to keep a roof over their head and food on their table. People in the United States, in some instances that don't have great health care, are house poor because of how much they have to shell out to have the medication available to keep them alive every month. So take that into consideration. There were a bunch of the Make America Healthy Again Avengers there with President Trump in the West Wing yesterday when this announcement was made. RFK Jr. and Dr. Oz were two of the notables. I've pulled a clip of RFK Jr. explaining why everyone in D.C. is panicking about this historic executive order from President Trump. Let's listen.
This is an extraordinary day. This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. This was the fulcrum of Bernie Sanders' runs for presidency, that he was going to eliminate this discrepancy between Europe and the United States. But as it turns out, none of them were doing it. It's one of these promises that politicians make to their constituents, knowing that they'll never have to do it. And the reason they'll never have to do it is because they know that Congress is controlled in so many ways by the pharmaceutical industry. There's at least one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every congressman, every senator on Capitol Hill, and every member of the Supreme Court. By some estimates, 3. Pharmaceutical companies, the industry itself, spends 3 times what the next largest lobbyist spends on lobbying. So this was an issue that people talked about, but nobody wanted to do anything because it was radioactive. They knew you couldn't get it by Congress. We now have a president who is a man of his word, who has the courage.
It's pretty funny that he mentions the word radioactive. It was coming across the news today, and as news has kind of tailed off because of the time difference between the United States and Saudi Arabia. So they're deep into the night right now in the Middle East, and we're enjoying the afternoon here in the United States. But it said that RFK Jr. and his family, including one of his kids and his grandchildren, recently went on a vacation, and RFK Jr. took his grandchildren to swim in a stream that was downstream from raw sewage being dumped into it, so that they were all swimming in raw sewage. Gotta love it. Oh! But I digress. You have to understand something. And the HHS secretary outlined it right there. The biggest lobbies up on Capitol Hill and in the nation's capital, obviously defense, obviously China, obviously Israel, and of course Big Pharma. And when you see the tortoise's pace that members of Congress from both sides of the aisle usually operate in regards to things that prevent China from doing what they do, defense contractors from getting their money, and Big Pharma doing what they do as well, this has to be addressed. So we have a president right now who isn't compromised by any of the lobbies. And he is setting the tone, and he will look to follow up on this if, let's just say, Congress doesn't have a huge interest in it. But when it comes to the left's narrative that Donald Trump is single-handedly destroying the healthcare system, well, rest assured that he took a big kaboom to that narrative yesterday after signing the executive order and while fielding questions. Let's check it out.
I think you're going to see a tremendous cut. I don't think. I mean, I know you're going to see it in Medicaid and Medicare. That cut will be massive because drugs are 50, 60% of the cost. So Medicaid costs are going down and Medicare costs are going down because of what we're doing today. And there's no, it's not like, oh, gee, well, maybe it won't happen. It's going to happen because the other countries have no choice. Now, the drug companies are going to have to say, listen, if you don't pay more, we're not going to give you the drug, and they're willing to do that. So that's it. They have to. We have to equalize.
Mr. President, what is this? Price controls.
Say it.
How do you respond to the fact that this?
It's not price control. No. What was price control is before. If you want to talk about price control, is what they were doing. They were making us pay. They set a price, and they said, "Here's what we're going to pay, and anything else charge America." Because at that time they had a very stupid president, and it really went crazy during the last 4 years. And remember this, the Democrats are the ones that allowed this to happen. They were the ones that were the protector of this pricing system. And I think it's going to be very hard. You'll have to ask Democrats, are they going to vote against the one great, big, beautiful deal that's being negotiated now, tax cuts, et cetera, when now on top of the tax cuts and regulation cuts, all the things, now you're going to say that the price of your medicine is going down by 60, 70, 80%. You're going to vote against it? I think a lot of Democrats are going to be forced to do something that their leaders are going to beg them not to do, and that's vote for the bill. I don't see how they can vote against it. How can they vote against it when drug prices, drugs and pharmaceuticals are going to be down 70, 80%.
And now when President Trump takes that question head on and pushes back, having a lot of knowledge on the situation as well, it really deflates the narrative that President Trump is going after and destroying Medicare, Medicaid, and raising the price of prescription drugs, making them unattainable for everyday Americans. So what do the Democrats do? Well, they do what they normally do. They switch gears and they ask President Trump ridiculous questions, things like about the Maryland man, things about like running for a third term, and all the other. But these are traps that President Trump sets for them, not ones that they are ever going to catch him in. So you guys know recently, or probably have heard, that President Trump was gifted a 747 aircraft to replace Air Force One. He got it from one of the Middle Eastern countries ahead of his trip. They're known as floating palaces. He announced it on his Truth Social the other day. I've got the post right here. So the fact that the Defense Department is getting a gift, free of charge, of a 747 aircraft to replace the 40-year-old Air Force One temporarily in a very public and transparent transition so bothers the crooked Democrats that they insist we pay top dollar for the plane. Anybody can do that. The Dems are world-class losers, MAGA. And, you know, it's like one of those things when the Democrats aren't happy unless they're bitching. And when President Trump was asked about this during this prescription drug breakthrough announcement, well, he took them for a little ride on the art of the weave. Let's listen.
What do you say to people who view that luxury jet as a personal gift to you? Why not leave it behind?
You're ABC fake news, right?
Why
Because
not?
only ABC, well, a few of you would. Let me tell you, you should be embarrassed asking that question. They're giving us a free jet. I could say, no, don't give us, I want to pay you $1 billion or 400 million or whatever it is. Or I could say, thank you very much. You know, there was an old golfer named Sam Snead. Did you ever hear him? He won 82 tournaments. He was a great golfer. And he had a motto: when they give you a putt, you say, thank you very much. You pick up your ball and you walk to the next hole. A lot of people are stupid. They say, no, I insist on putting it. And then they putt it and they miss it. And their partner gets angry at them. You know what? Remember that, Sam Snead. When they give you a putt, you pick it up and you walk to the next hole and you say, thank you very much.
Respectfully, sir, as a businessman, some people may look at this and say, have you ever been given a gift worth millions of dollars and then not received anything?
It's not a gift to me, it's a gift to the Department of Defense. And you should know better, because you've been embarrassed enough, and so has your network. Your network is a disaster. ABC is a disaster.
Oh, boy. So, yeah, it went off the rails. Like it normally does, but President Trump did what he needed to do to... Listen, I really don't think there's anything wrong with this. I really don't think that the American people see it as President Trump is being gifted this plane that he's going to take here or there or wherever. I think with the delays in the upgrades to the new Air Force One, this will probably be used in the interim once, stripped, cleaned, and made fitted appropriate for presidential travel. But at the end of the day, like I said, this is probably going to wind up at maybe President Trump's museum or presidential library, or maybe down on one of his properties once he's out of public office. But at the same time, it's like, and just listen to it and be able to explain to people that you interact with in your normal everyday lives, where are Democrats' priorities right now? Using violence at ICE detainment facilities, being upset that President Trump is holding Big Pharma accountable, signing defense contracts with our geopolitical allies instead of going to war, and so on and so forth. Think about it a little bit and stew on that as we're getting ready right now to jump in with one of our favorites, Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett. But before we do that, we're also going to have another check-in with one of our partners. I think it's time we had a conversation about a good night's sleep. Pillow King of Minnesota, Mike Lindell, and the apparatus known as the MyPillow family has been cranking out savings down at MyPillow for over 20 years. And for the first time in 20 years, they've changed the long-standing MyPillow and now have the MyPillow version 2.0. You enter promo code STAKE at checkout, you're going to get buy one, get one free. In addition to that, they've got great savings on all things like MyPillow dog beds, the Air Lindell version 1 and 2, My Slippers, and Giza Dream Everything. If you're more of a morning person, they've launched My Coffee. It's available in the bean, the bag, and the pod. When you enter promo code STAKE here, you're going to get 25% off your order or 50% off when you make it a monthly subscription. MyPillow.com/stake for anything sleep related. If you want the coffee, MyStore.com/stake, or you can always talk to a qualified pillow representative. 1-800-658-8045. All right, joining us next on the show today, this big Tuesday edition of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. He's the congressman who represents Tennessee's 2nd Congressional District, which means we're welcoming back Representative Tim Burchett. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Always a pleasure to host. Busy times. And I want to start off where most of the media and I think the world is focused on today. That's President Trump's historic trip to the Middle East, meeting with the Saudi Arabian delegation, talking about a lot of things. They say it's about American investments. President Trump also was able to secure $600 billion at least in that moving forward. But there seemed to be a lot more diplomacy and peace through strength and opportunity for the world to kind of move along together. Congressman, definitely the opposite of the narrative that's kind of been American diplomacy or lack thereof in that region for many, many decades. As you've watched this kind of unfolded or know what's going on with President Trump's trip, how do you see this being a plus positive for the president who's always done things a little bit differently, and it seems like to get towards some of the goals he wants for America, he's going to do just that again?
It's respect through fear. The folks over there, they respect President Trump, but they fear him as well. He's not going to write them some tough letter. He's going to react. And everybody thinks that's militarily, but I think President Trump understands better than most that America's one of our greatest strengths is our economic might, and he gets that. They realize the dollars, dollars from oil at some point might be limiting or they might run out. I don't know if I believe that or not, but I think that we've with our small nuclear modular reactors, I think the Saudis are interested in that. I've noticed the Chinese are investing in our schools and they're just trying to steal everything we have. And I think the Saudis see it as a business-like relationship. And I would rather them being investing in our country than the red communist Chinese. So there's a lot going on. There's also you mentioned diplomacy. It's Iran. They are getting nuclear capabilities. We're afraid, and we don't need that. And the more moderate Muslim countries, if you will, do not want that either. And they don't need war. They don't want their sons and daughters going off and dying because of Iran's aggressions. So I think there's talks there, and Iran is sort of sending out a message not to play ball with us or suffer the consequences. And I think it's a pretty shallow. It's a very weak threat. And I don't think Trump's going to pay much attention to it. I met with the King of Jordan last week, King Abdullah. He's been very kind to our country, and it's been a very mutual friendship. And I don't believe he wants that war either. And also, there's going to be talk of refugees from Gaza and where they go. And honestly, nobody really wants them.
Sure.
It's trouble. You've seen it's like us taking these MS-13 gang members. It is nothing but trouble. And not that every refugee in Gaza is going to be trouble, but I think there is some there, and they realize it. So they're trying to negotiate something there, but we'll see. We'll see what happens with it.
It's going to be really interesting to see, and you make some good points there. You talk about that diplomatic angle that President Trump has taken. I do think the dollar is valued a lot more than, pun intended, the sword in the region right now and in this modern day. You look at the countries that he's set to visit as well, with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE. You're talking about countries that are dependent on oil, on tourism, and in the breath of Qatar, the revolutionary steps they're taking in advancing AI. None of those things have to do with radical Islamic terrorism. They don't have anything to do with massive war or Arab Spring-like rise-ups happening throughout the region like we saw in Syria late last year as well. President Trump's looking to maybe bring Syria into the mix and lower some sanctions for them to kind of modernize themselves, as maybe making a stop in Turkey and kind of encompassing that whole trip around, providing a little bit more security and stability, not just for the region, but for our longstanding ally, the nation of Israel as well. President Trump has always done a good job, Congressman, of playing the long game. I think he's kind of reset the standard and have helped Republicans along, the ones who can't see it, that playing the long game is where it's at. Do you think that this might be a case of just that?
I do. He's a chess player, and everybody else is playing checkers. They always sell him short. But no, you're exactly right. Also, I think with the situation with India and Pakistan,
sure.
I know I was on this morning at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Supposed to be on for a little 5-minute interview on Fox, and it was an hour and 15 minutes or something. And so I'm burning on about no cylinders right now. But the you mentioned AI, and that's something that the Saudis and the rest are heavily invested in. Yep. I think they really see that future there too. And so I think there's a lot of room to work there between us and them. And I can't emphasize enough, though, the investments in our schools. They are investing billions of dollars in research, and the research hopefully comes with partnerships, not like the Chinese who just steal everything.
Sure.
And so, and Trump realizes that, and that's putting the pressure on China right now. I mean, and also I think the Saudis know they need rare earth minerals, and short of invading Central America, as the Chinese pretty much have, and putting slave labor to work, I think they realize that they could utilize some of our rare earth minerals in this country. And with Trump in Ukraine planting American flags over there, and Putin knows if he were to errantly fire a missile into an American encampment, that
Yep.
that would draw the ire of our people. And so there's a lot going on with that. And I'm just glad Trump's in the White House. I've said it many times. I don't want him teaching my daughter's dadgum Sunday school class, but I sure like him in that house on Pennsylvania Avenue.
I like it. We're going to run with that one. You know, President Trump made some announcements ahead of this trip yesterday. He was supposed to come out and talk about making the cost of medicine and access to it fair again in the United States. But before he did, he announced, listen, Congressman, you watch a lot of the news. You're on a lot of the news, just as we are here on Steak for Breakfast. I was told by a lot of major outlets that Donald Trump had ruined the stock market forever just a few weeks ago. But here we are getting ready to get into a big trade deal with China. We do know this is kind of appeasement for both countries, but the bending of the knee when everyone said that it wouldn't happen, that this was going to globally continue to send the market in a downward trend, it was going to initiate a recession here in the United States as well. It looks like we may have dodged that bullet for the time being, and I think it's just another step in the right direction economically for President Trump's agenda.
Yeah, my $11,000 mutual fund portfolio, I think it's now at 12,000. So
I like
I'm rocking it. I have to pay for my daughter's school. I put that in that account for that purpose. So I'm enjoying that. So yeah, I think it's time that America pays attention to what's going on, and I think the world is paying attention to who's in the White House, and we are very fortunate. I would caution everybody, though, we have got to start codifying some of these things the president has so bravely put in place. And there's a reason that he didn't ask Congress's opinion on these tariffs. And the reason of that is Congress is compromised by the communist Chinese.
Sure.
One way or the other. They got our number. We're greedy. We're politicians are hogs at the trough. And maybe the lobbyists know who they're representing, maybe they don't, but indirectly it is the Chinese. The only reason how are they allowed to buy large swatches of land, of farmland? They're controlling a commodity. How are they allowed to buy property in and around our military bases? How are they allowed to run commissaries in our military installations? They're allowed to do that because politicians have no guts, and we are addicted to the dollars. And Trump realized that, and that's why he put the strong tariff on China. And he didn't go through Congress. I'm sure Congress would have a study, and we'd write them a strong letter. But let's just be honest, we don't have the guts to do it. Trump does, and that's why he's done it.
Now, you mentioned codifying some of those executive orders into law. You know, maybe you can explain a little bit of the process to us and why it's taken up to this point. I mean, I know working on the reconciliation package is a big thing, and you guys have spent a lot of time in district as we're getting ready to kind of jump into the start of the midterm election cycle here. But the fact of the matter is that President Trump is probably expecting some of these things to become law. And what's been the holdup?
We don't have any guts. We've got the committee system is fraught with problems. We are limited government Republicans, and we have 20, 30, 40, 50 maybe staff members in some of these big committees.
Sure.
And every day we'll have a bill, and it's a reporting bill. And it says, report this to Congress after a year. Now, why are we doing reporting bills? Because somebody came out with a good, strong bill, and guess what? A staff member had a problem with it. Now, who cares what a staff member has a problem with but the chairman, because these committees are too big and we are compromised. And we have sold our soul to the devil. And, maybe the chairman isn't corrupted, but you could probably easily have a staff member that is, and that could pigeonhole a bill or shackle it with some stupid rule or regulation. And then I've heard chairmen say many times, I can't pass this because my staff would kill me.
Right.
Who cares what your dadgum staff thinks? I don't care. I'm tired of waiting on staff. I'm tired of waiting on legal services. All these people are compromised, brother. They don't have our interest at heart, and they're not elected. They outlive the politicians, and it's got to change. And America needs to start calling it out.
We're going to have to see how fast people start jumping when Donald Trump starts calling it out, because although the agenda's been packed for the last couple months, it is going to eventually even out, and he's going to wonder where those executive orders are and if they're coming up through the House of Representatives. Speaking of which, how's the reconciliation package come along? I know we're in the final steps here. Some arguments over SALT, some arguments over taxes, maybe overall cuts as well, disagreements, and not meeting in the middle just yet in the lower chamber. But we are kind of in final markups for the last three big committees, and that should be heading to, or at least coming to a head by around Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, it's apparent that it's not going anywhere, and that the reason it's not is because President Trump has not intervened yet. When he intervenes, you'll see the knees start quaking. And then, I was asked the other day, I sit on my second row to the back. I call it Center's Row. People come sit with me when they're in trouble.
Oh, gosh.
Because I don't care. There go I by the grace of God. But I turn back to some conservatives that you would know. We're in the back row behind me talking, and they said, "Burchett, you're not going to say that? You're not going to get involved in this yet?" And I said, "Nope." And they said, "Why not?" I said, "Why should I?" I said, "Y'all are going to peel off, and that last day, it's just going to be a few of us there. So there's no reason for me to even interject anything right now." And they all laughed, but it's the truth, and they know it.
Well, the truth and the realest deal is what we get every time you join us on the show, Congressman. That's why we invite you on so much. Listen, we've got everything live linked in the show description today, including a link to your congressional website. They can check out the newsletter, all the stuff you're doing up on Capitol Hill, which is great. And while you're back in district, you got another account on social media. Tell our listeners what that is, and we'll live link that as well.
Are you talking about my Twitter or X account or which? I've got Facebook. I'm on, what all am I on? Instagram. I've got them all.
I think we want the spicy Twitter.
Yeah, at Tim Burchett.
That's it.
At Tim Burchett. That's the one, and I'll light it up. And that's the one I had a little video a couple weeks ago on one of the trackers out here at Jump Me. Had over 7 million views.
Yep.
The vice president even retweeted it, so it's pretty cool.
It is. Loved it. Loved catching up with the congressman representing Tennessee's 2nd Congressional District, Representative Tim Burchett. Thanks for coming on the show today, sir. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Brother, it's always good to be on Steak for Breakfast. Thank you.
I want to echo the Secretary's remarks with respect to the Swiss government. They've been so welcoming, and they've hosted this, and everything has gone off flawlessly, and we appreciate that. And again, to the Chinese negotiators, Vice Premier Liu He, Vice Minister Li Qiangong, and Vice Minister Liao Min, worked very diligently, and these are very tough negotiators. A couple of them I know from before and have had past interactions with them. And this was, as the Secretary pointed out, a very constructive 2 days. It's important to understand how quickly we were able to come to agreement, which reflects that perhaps the differences were not so large as maybe thought. That being said, there was a lot of groundwork that went into these 2 days. Just to remember why we're here in the first place. The United States has a massive $1.2 trillion trade deficit. So the president declared a national emergency and imposed tariffs. And we're confident that the deal we struck with our Chinese partners will help us to work toward resolving that national emergency.
All right, jumping back into the news portion of the show here. Last news segment on the back end of 2 Big Tuesday editions of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. I'm Roan, still here with you. And as always, it's great catching up with Representative Tim Burchett. Just one of the long-term good friends and hardest workers for the American people on this show. And that was the U.S. Trade Representative Greer talking about the fallout from the meeting between the highest-ranking delegations of those involved with trade from the U.S. and China, which met last weekend in Geneva, to agree to disagree to the point to where we're at, lowering tariffs and entering into what we hope is going to be permanent negotiations regarding this issue. Again, President Trump, via his True Social account, talked about the amount of work that's gotten done since he's came back to the Oval Office. In just 3 months, trillions of dollars, and therefore a record number of jobs, have been pouring into the USA. This is because of my tariff policy, our great November 5th election win, And these very stupid Democrats are doing everything within their power to disparage what is happening. They are totally unhinged, and they have lost all levels of confidence. It's a financial revolution, and they are being crushed. MAGA. So that's where President Trump was at coming out of the weekend, and this is where Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was following the meetings of the U.S. and China trade delegations, which had included our Treasury Secretary. Let's hear him.
What has to happen is it has to be fair for the American people. But in January 2020, President Trump produced a template. We had an excellent trade agreement with China, and the Biden administration chose not to enforce it. The Chinese delegation basically told us that once President Biden came into office, they just ignored their obligations.
Oh, perfect.
So, we all already have a large framework. The other thing to remember here, Jonathan, is that this is a pause down to 10%. The April 2nd level for China is 34%. So we will be working to see where their final reciprocal number ends up. And the negotiations are a combination of tariffs, non-tariff trade barriers, currency manipulation, and subsidies of labor and capital.
All the great stuff we talk about here on the show. So, yeah. President Trump yesterday also made an announcement following the one coming on prescription drugs about what's going on in regards to the complete trade reset between the United States and China as well. I've got the clip pulled up. Let's check it out.
In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue in the larger structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that, or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals, because we want to bring the pharmaceutical businesses back to the United States, and they're already starting to come back now based on tariffs.
So there you have it. Still talking tough with China, but at the very least, lowering some of the Liberation Day tariffs down to levels that are going to allow them for only the next 90 days to work out the guts of the framework that's already up right now regarding the negotiations that went down between the United States and China. I think it's huge to kind of wrap your brain around what would it mean if China came back into the fold like they did during the end of the second year of Donald Trump's first 4 in office during his initial term. I think that when our nations work together and all of the bad negative stuff, the IP theft and the currency manipulation and the goods shipping undisclosure, how they can kind of, wipe the China off of outgoing shipments once they dock and launder themselves through other countries before they're back out to sea and arriving in American and Western nations' ports. If we could minimize that and meet in the middle on tariffs, and China opens up a little bit to American businesses and goods, this will be a massive win for President Trump. It'll put China at its lowest point global trade-wise since before its admittance to the WTO several decades ago, and something that every Republican president and some of the Democrats since have said they've regretted our nation allowing that to happen and pushing for it, while at the same time saying that they'd address it and then just not doing it. And I saw CNBC was kind of breaking this down a little bit. Let's hear what they had to say.
Geneva, we witnessed marathon talks over the last 2 days, 8 hours of discussions on Saturday, several hours more yesterday, and they've yielded a major breakthrough. As you noted, we've seen the U.S. and China now agree to slash tariffs for 90 days. So both sides have agreed to cut tariffs by 115%. In terms of China's tariffs on U.S. goods, it's now going to come down to 10%. The U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods going to drop from 145% to 30%, because you've still got some levies on fentanyl well in there. During the 90 days, the Trump administration, Secretary Scott Bessent saying the two sides will negotiate. The U.S. will continue moving toward a more balanced trading relationship.
So there you have it. And it seems like it's definitely something that we have moving forward that's going to be very favorable for President Trump in regards to another instance where he would have been right. And honestly, I think once we get past these trade negotiations and things get a little bit more formalized to where maybe both nations could walk away and say, like, we won, and the other one say, we won as well. Well, that means that the leaders are best serving their own people. And at the same time, it's going to allow for that fog to clear. And in the instance of the relationship between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, maybe to get back on the same page, some face-to-face meetings and things of that nature. Again, I am hopeful for that because, again, when more countries are working together, there's more of an opportunity for peace. Where more countries are pushing to do good, there is less room for evil. And when things go off the rails and we have some kind of national or international incident or catastrophe or attack or whatever, it's the people that are working alongside each other in, let's just say, trade that might come together on defense and work towards a more sensible and plausible and even peaceful overall solution. So I think that's really the way you have to look at this, while at the same time understanding it's probably going to go the distance and almost the full 90 days before we get to any kind of final disposition on it. So, but again, this was something that the Democrats, the mainstream media, even some of the naysayers within the Republican Party, I saw them dunking on Rand Paul the last couple of nights on places like Fox News and even CNN that's saying that the tariffs and the trade war wouldn't work. It has to this point, and we'll have to see if we can seal this deal before the end of the next 90 days and have this be another big win for President Trump and the America First movement. Guys, wherever you're listening to the show today, hope you're enjoying now the second of two big Tuesday editions of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. Do us a favor, share the show with everyone you know, friends, family, coworkers, and loved ones. Head over to your favorite podcasting platforms. We're on all of them, but prefer you to do it on Apple and Spotify. Subscribe to the show for free. Make sure it's downloaded into your electronic devices. Rate the show 5 stars, and please write a review. And then check us out on social media, Twitter, Getter, True Social, Instagram, and TikTok is where we have accounts. Find us, follow us, hit the notification bell. Even check out our new YouTube channels, and you'll never miss out on all the great stuff we've got going on down here over at Steak for Breakfast. All right, round and third, heading home. Last couple clips I've got of the day. You know, outside of the big changes coming to the cost of prescription drugs for Americans, in addition to the resetting of the trade imbalance with China that could be worked out and finalized over the course of the next 90 days, you know, there is another skirmish, much in the same sense as what's going on with Israel and Hamas and Russia and Ukraine, popping up in the world that President Trump doesn't want to have doing anything that's going to hold back the progress that his administration has made so far, especially when it concerns one of our longtime allies in India, and one that we've collaborated with a little bit more personally over the course of the past decade or two in Pakistan. President Trump had another announcement to make following some developments and a breakthrough since the border skirmish between India and Pakistan had popped off and gotten pretty kinetic over the course of the past week and a half. Let's listen.
We're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. And they have. And they did it for a lot of reasons, but trade is a big one. We're going to do a lot of trade with Pakistan. We're going to do a lot of trade with India. We're negotiating with India right now. We're going to be soon negotiating with Pakistan. And we stopped the nuclear conflict. I think it could have been a bad nuclear war. Millions of people could have been killed. So I'm very proud of that. I also want to thank.
It's a big deal. I mean, there had been dogfights with military jets, rocket and missile and drone attacks, some terrorism going on, and so on and so forth. And President Trump was able to, at least for the immediate future, drive a wedge between the two feuding nations and used the incentive as big, beautiful trade deals with the United States as enough to get them to move it on back towards the sidelines. You know, one of the biggest promises made, promises kept, was to not forget about any Americans who have been left or abandoned abroad, especially by the Biden-Harris regime previously to President Trump coming back into the White House. And I saw over the course of the past couple of days, we finally have the last living American hostage who has been held by Hamas in Gaza for over 500 days, was released yesterday, turned over to the Red Cross, and is now back with his family, and has already talked and thanked President Trump. He made that announcement in the West Wing yesterday ahead of his trip to Saudi Arabia today. Let's hear what the president had to say about it.
And third, I'm very happy to announce that Idan Alexander, an American citizen who until recently most thought was no longer living, thought was dead, is going to be released in about 2 hours, actually. And he's going to be released before the eyes of Steve Witkoff, who has done a fantastic job. I know a lot of people, they have a lot of talent. I know Steve had a lot of talent. But I know a lot of people with a lot of talent, but there's one that I thought had a special way about him, special personality, aside from being a good deal maker, had a special way about him, and it was Steve. Knew very little about the subject matter, who does? But he learned it in about 2 hours. And he's been fantastic. So I want to just thank Steve. But they're going to be releasing Idan in about 2 hours from now, or sometime today, let's say. And again, they thought he was dead just a short while ago. His parents are so happy. They're so happy. So it's, as you know, Idan's the only American citizen who's captured and held hostage by Hamas since October 7th, 2023. And he's coming home to his parents, which is really great news. I mean, to me, it's big news. They thought he was dead. So that's that.
That is that. You know, it's amazing to see the amount of things that we were able to accomplish in just such a short amount of time this week. You really have to take into consideration the fact that President Trump is working on what seems to be beyond overtime. But, you know, we stress this ad extent here on Steak for Breakfast. The guy's only got 3 2/4 years left to be president. Depending on what happens within the House of Representatives in the midterm elections, there's no way to determine on how much of that agenda is going to be able to get carried out throughout the course of the back end of this term in office. So he's got max pressure on Congress, max pressure on the Senate, max pressure on his administration, and of course, max pressure on the Democrats, who are running scared right now. You know, Chuck Schumer says he's going to hold up DOJ confirmations until he receives clarity on the gift of the Boeing 747, like floating or flying palace that's coming down the pike from UAE. And you've got Hakeem Jeffries in the House of Representatives say if law enforcement, federal law enforcement, arrests any of the members of Congress who assaulted federal officers and workers outside of that detention facility in upstate New Jersey last Friday, well, we'll see what happens, essentially threatening more violence. But remember, just in the past 48 hours, the United States inked a trade deal with England. They negotiated a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. They lowered farmer prices anywhere from 30 to 80%. They arranged a safe return of Eden Alexander, an American citizen and hostage held there by Hamas in Gaza since 2023. They struck the initial stages of a trade deal with China with an announcement set for sometime over the course of the next 90 days of when they can finalize. In addition, Donald Trump secured at least a $600 billion trade deal, incentive deal, defense deal with Saudi Arabia just today after addressing the Saudi-U.S. Investment Forum in the capital city of Riyadh. Let me remind you, it's just Tuesday evening here on the West Coast. So lots of winning coming down the pike, and lots of winning is where we're going to circle back. I've got one last clip And as our last audio clip of the week, I want you guys to really remember this as like your steak for breakfast homework about all of the failures of administrations and administrative states past on the meddling and the warmongering and the nation building and the ridiculous failures of what peace through strength didn't look like under previous presidents and during different administrations. Here again is President Trump at the Saudi U.S. Investment Forum, hammering the deep state and letting all the neocons know that there is no room for that kind of rhetoric here in America first. And with President Trump at the helm, let's hear it.
In recent years, far too many American presidents have been afflicted with the notion that it's our job to look into the souls of foreign leaders and use U.S. policy to dispense justice for their sins. They loved using our very powerful military, and now it's really the most powerful it's ever been. We just are getting a budget approved, $1 trillion, highest budget we've ever had in history for military, $1 trillion. And we're getting the greatest missiles, the greatest weapons. And, you know, I hate to do it, but you have to do it because we believe in peace through strength. You have to have the strength, otherwise bad things could happen. But hopefully we'll never have to use any of those weapons. Seems to be an awfully big waste of money if you're never going to use them, but hopefully we'll never have to use them because the destructive power of some of those weapons are like nobody's seen before. I believe it is God's job to sit in judgment, my job to defend America and to promote the fundamental interest of stability, prosperity, and peace. That's what I really want to do.
And after today's big summit and sit down and speech, that's exactly where the president's at. We're going to leave it at that as we're getting ready to jump in and wrap up our show today with Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles. But before we do, we're also going to have a final check-in with one of our partners.
It's an unpleasant truth that 42% of Americans are obese and 79% of Americans are overweight. That's practically 1 in every 2 Americans living day to day with every minute counting down to the end of an unhealthy existence. It's time to change that and make Americans healthy again. You've probably heard about weight loss injections that can help you get back into that right mindset and help curb those cravings so you can focus on what's really important. New Hope Wellness has changed thousands of lives, and maybe it can change yours too. They are American family owned and operated with the goal of saving lives. With convenient telehealth options, you can speak to a licensed professional from the comfort of your own home, and all products are delivered discreetly to your front door. Visit newhopewellness.com/state and start your journey to a better you. That's newhopewellness.com/state to get your free consultation and $100 off your first order. 1-800-527-2150. Make America healthy again.
All right, joining us next on the show today, this big Tuesday edition of the Steak for Breakfast podcast. He's the congressman who represents Tennessee's 5th congressional district, which means we're welcoming back Representative Andy Ogles. Thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. I just want to say I appreciate what you do. You know, it's a great day in America. Donald Trump is president. Illegals are being deported. Inflation is going down. Trade deals are getting done. And then we have people like you, voices like you of conservatism that are really telling the truth and fighting against the woke media. So for that, I just want to say thank you.
Congressman, always a pleasure to host, and you just kind of outlined all the things we'd love to talk with you on. Listen,
okay.
It seems like the kickoff to a pretty historic trip for President Trump in the Middle East right now. He's in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, meeting with the Crown Prince and a large delegation there at the U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum. We're talking trade deals, already securing $600 billion for the United States. MBS has pledged to get that as close to $1 trillion as possible, plus create a whole bunch of more American jobs. But there was a lot of other announcements, kind of a warning to Iran to either join the global community or continue to pursue their nuclear ambitions, and the formalization of relations with places like Lebanon and Syria again. When you look at the way President Trump handles these things, and it's usually a bunch of things at once that all kind of come together at the end, this is a textbook example of it. And I just kind of want to see how your office is looking at this and how you're tracking President Trump's the kickoff to his trip to the Middle East.
Well, it's more than just the trip to the Middle East, right? You have a trade deal with the UK. You see trade negotiations ongoing with China. Behind the scenes, there's a couple of other countries that have been at the table redoing their trade deals. I won't get ahead of the announcements. Then, of course, he goes to the Middle East, and you see this effort, this desire by the Middle East to have a better relationship with the United States. And like you said, Iran is the outlier. And as you see more normalization, more investment into the United States and cooperation. And look, we have a tremendous opportunity. A stronger Europe and United States partnership is good for our countries, but also puts China in its place. When you have better trade with the Middle East, and look, I don't trust all the countries in the Middle East, but again, they're there. We have opportunities to trade with them, and the same way with India. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot on the table, and a lot of moving parts behind the scenes. So as a member of Congress, someone who's close to the president, as a member of Congress, I've been in several countries over the last few weeks, talking trade, meeting with members of the European Parliament. I was just in El Salvador talking about trade, looking at what they're doing there, the opportunities for American investment. Again, as we decouple from China, there's opportunities in Central and South America. As we decouple from China, there's opportunities in the Middle East. As we look for American jobs coming back to our country, there's investment from both Europe, Asia, and of course the Middle East coming into the United States. Even in my district, Trump is laying down a master class in trade because you have all these companies reinvesting in the United States of America, creating jobs, more manufacturing jobs, which is good for the economy, it's good for inflation, and it's good for anyone who's pursuing that American dream.
You saw that inflation rate announced coming down again. No one expected that. I was actually told a couple weeks ago that President Trump was going to ruin the economy, tank the stock market forever, and then a European delegation led by the UK was going to form a blockade against the Trump tariff plan. It was so ironic that the UK was the first team to put ink to the paper in regards to the new trade deals for the United States. You had mentioned that leading in to your explanation of the last one, Congressman. Tell us about how important this deal is and what it means to kind of the domino effect for the other countries who are chomping at the bit to get in here and make new trade deals with the United States.
Well, a lot of it, the economy, it's a big, complex organism. So the Fed, in regards to interest rates, just met. They held them stable, right? There was not a cut, which I think most people trying to buy a house, business owners out there, if you've got a hotel, whether you got a small business, you're Joe the plumber, you've got a loan, you've got debt, you want to see interest rates coming down. And because there hadn't been trade deals announced yet, the Fed held the rates steady. Now, what I'm going to predict is that on June 16th, when they meet again, that you're going to see 1, 2, maybe even 3/4 point cuts to the interest rates. Why? Because now the markets know that Europe is ready to make new deals when it comes to trade. They know China wants to come back to the negotiating table. You see what's happening in the Middle East. You're going to see, whether it's Japan or some other countries coming to the table, renegotiating. And so what that does is that gives confidence to the markets. And it signals to the markets in the global economy that, look, America's back in charge. We're the global predator when it comes to our military and lethality. We're the dominant economic force globally, and we're the reserve place to invest in capital. And so all of that means good news for Americans, whether it's jobs, whether it's interest rates, whether it's the cost of goods. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. But I say we're going to have an amazing economy this summer. You're already beginning to see the signs of that. And as you see more and more of these deals, be announced, again, I think that's going to buffer the fact that you're going to see some interest rate cuts. You're going to have more trade deals and more jobs coming to our great nation.
Now, when you saw the announcement yesterday, after China tried to play chicken with President Trump and obviously blanked, they had some big movement and shaken up when they were in Geneva earlier this week to know that they're coming to the negotiation table, that the tariffs between the two countries are now being lowered while those negotiations take place. But President Trump isn't going to wait forever to ink a deal with China because he knows, like you had mentioned, all the decoupling around the world, the jobs and investments coming back to the United States. We're resetting the global trade standard, and China's not going to have a say in it unless they want to be a part of it and do it the right way. How big of an announcement is that ahead of this trip right now? I mean, President Trump has brought India and Pakistan to a ceasefire. He's got China to the negotiation table, and then he's already starting his Middle East trip. It seems like it's a lot of stuff going on at the same time, like you had mentioned, but in the same thread, it just seems that President Trump is all working towards one ultimate goal of actually making America great again.
Yeah, I mean, what I'll say is the president has a big vision for what he wants to get accomplished in his second term. He's assembled a great team. He has great partners in the House of Representatives, those of us that have been out there also working on some of these issues. And so there's a lot of effort going into making America great again. And part of that is, again, like you said, China has its own economic issues. And so they can't really afford a trade war with the United States of America. And quite frankly, if they want to go down this path that even encourages, incentivizes, and accelerates the pace at which we will decouple from their economy, we'll go to India, we'll go to Central and South America, we'll do more in Mexico and Canada, and suddenly China is going to find itself on an island, albeit a big island, but they won't have the greatest economy in the world, which is the United States of America. And just remember, they're wholly dependent on our economy, just as we, quite frankly, are over-dependent on them for manufacturing.
Yep. No, that's it right there. And then, I do have to ask, last Friday we ended our show kind of leading into the disaster that was going on in North Jersey when some of your esteemed colleagues from the other side of the aisle decided to do a little mosh pitting in front of an ICE detention facility in North Jersey.
Was that a mosh pit or an insurrection? I mean, I just, the way the Democrats redefine things, but no, it's unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you had members of Congress storm the gates of a detention facility, potentially assaulting members of law enforcement, that's not acceptable. I don't care who you are, Joe the plumber, stay-at-home mom, or member of Congress. You can't assault a member of our law enforcement and expect to get away with it. I have not seen the video in its entirety, but the bits that I've seen, I think there's a strong case to be made. An investigation should be had, and then whether or not charges should be issued in the assault of these officers by members of Congress.
100% agree. Now, I just want to take us back in the Wayback Machine to the last administration, and when the Republican conference was trying to do any kind of oversight, let's just say it was at a department of the federal government or at the jail where there were January 6th detainees being held, you couldn't just walk up to the door, knock with camera crews, and expect to be let in and shown the full gambit in an attempt to provide oversight. There are congressional measures and methods that go through the appropriate channels before, obviously, you'll be allowed to do so, but have to do before you're allowed to do so, correct?
Well, let's keep in mind, let's put this in context. You've literally had moms, grandmothers standing on a sidewalk in front of an abortion clinic praying and be sent to jail. And now you have members of Congress assaulting police officers and storming the gates, the fence of a detention center. I have a problem with that. Again, I think an investigation should be had. And if assault took place, then you can do the rest. You can write the rest of this story. You can't attack police officers. And already we're seeing, because of these woke mayors demonizing, criminalizing, making reckless statements in regards to ICE and deportations, that the attacks on our law enforcement officers are up 400, 500, 600% depending on the jurisdiction. And so these comments, these actions are inflammatory. And again, if they assaulted these police officers, there should be justice.
No, there certainly should be. And then sticking in the thread of immigration, but talking about one of your more recent trips, you had the opportunity to go down to El Salvador and tour CCOT lately. This is something that our listenership has definitely dived into, and we'd like to hear a little bit of commentary on the back end of your trip.
Well, so to give your listeners context, El Salvador has been in a state of violence for the last 35, 40 years. You had the civil wars in the 80s, you have dictatorships, you've had extreme gang violence. It was not a safe community. They essentially don't have much of an economy because of all of that. And Bukele was elected and he issued some reforms. He went after the gangs, boldly went after the gangs, and has essentially incarcerated the gang members, some of the most violent gangs in the world, into CCOT prison. And so we were able to, I met with the president. We talked about his reforms, the steps he had to take, and quite frankly, put his life at risk to do so. But then also the opportunity for trade. And again, as we look to decouple, when we look at emerging economies, new economies like El Salvador, that can not only serve as a model for Honduras and Costa Rica and some of these other countries of how do you fight back against the gangs? How do you create an economy that's based on manufacturing and technology? El Salvador, I think, is going to be a huge success story 10 years from now. And so as we look to decouple, this is a huge story. And so I went to the prison, and what I can tell you is there's some bad people there. I mean, the majority of these folks have committed dozens of murders. One of them got into the gangs when he was 13. He was bouncing back and forth between New Hampshire and I think it was Virginia. And in the course of his career in MS-13 had killed, wait for it, 50 people. Wow. And when he answered that question, he answered as plainly as you and I, hey, did you have lunch today? You might say, yes, I did, or no, I didn't. That's how he answered that question. 50 people, and there was no remorse. And he was asked, well, do you have friends in the gangs? His response was, there are no friends. It's all about power. It's all about money. It's all about respect. Yeah. And those are the folks who are in this country, who are destroying our cities, and who we need to deport. no questions asked, and quite frankly, the president of El Salvador is happy to take them and make sure they never harm another individual again. And going back to the mayor of Nashville, it's those types of people that he is defending. He's choosing criminals over the people of Nashville. He's choosing criminals over the people of Tennessee. And if he obstructs justice, he should be investigated as well.
He certainly should. And then, getting into the thread of House business and what the next couple of weeks look like, I've watched the way that this entire process has kind of hashed out. I know you guys are in the last three committees for markups right now. There's like taxes, there's SALT, there's a whole bunch of other stuff before you guys are done with this bill on or around Memorial Day weekend. But here's the deal. I also noticed in the last couple of votes that you guys had, the Democrats and the media have really ramped up the negative rhetoric right before you guys are able to pull out a victory. Looking at how things have been going on for the last couple of weeks and heading towards Memorial Day weekend, do you guys feel you're in that same thread? Like, everybody wants to hear their voice heard. Everybody wants to hear the concerns heard. Everybody has an idea whether your district is like ruby red or purple, or there are even cases of Republicans who have won blue districts in here in the United States on what's important to them and what the numbers need to look like to be able to provide their constituents with evidence that you guys are doing the things that you ran on in the last election cycle, which I believe to this point of this session of Congress you guys are. What's the latest you could tell us on the reconciliation package and how it's moving forward?
So I literally just was in a meeting with the White House, and we were talking about this very topic. So as you said, the three big committees are going through the process now: Ways and Means, Energy and Commerce, and Ag. But I want to give you an example of one of the things that we're working on and has to be addressed. We have all three branches of government. We've talked about reforming, Medicaid. You have individuals on Medicaid that make more are getting more in benefits than elderly folks who can't afford prescriptions or food. You have illegals getting more on Medicaid than elderly who can't afford prescriptions or food. You have able-bodied men who aren't working getting Medicaid and getting more in benefits than seniors who can't afford prescriptions and food. That's a problem. I have a problem with that. I'm guessing most people have a problem with that.
Absolutely.
So we've got to have some sort of work requirements. If you're able to work, and there can be some formulas, there can be some sliding ratios, but if you're able to work, get your butt out there and work. If you're able-bodied, go get a job. If you're illegal, you don't get benefits. Go back home. I mean, so these are normal conversations, and at a time where we're barreling towards 37, before you know it, a blink of an eye, it'll be $40 trillion in debt. We've got to get serious about this. And so the fraud, the abuse, and the waste, that's an easy place to start. And Medicaid reform with work requirements and getting the illegals and those who, quite frankly, aren't eligible for Medicaid, but we know they're on there. Let's get them off, and let's get back to the business of the people. But look, it's going to be a tough couple of weeks. I think you're going to see some gnashing of the teeth between the mods and the Democrats and the conservatives. But at the end of the day, we've got to land the plane. So, but for me, these Medicaid reforms, the work requirements have to be in there.
Have to be. Speaker Johnson said it a couple weeks ago when he was on the show. We've heard so many people throughout the conference who have come on in the week since he's been on say the exact same thing. And then in closing today, I do want to ask, because our listenership, I've seen a lot of confusion in regards to the codification of Trump's executive orders, not on the congressional side, but out on social media. I see people make commentary on it like this should be done already. I see people talking about, I don't understand if President Trump does an executive order, like how it gets codified in the law. What are some of the processes you guys are looking to take in the next couple weeks or months moving forward to work on some of the codifications of President Trump's executive orders? And how does that process kind of shake out for the long game to make sure that some of them do get codified in the law?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's something that we have to do. In fact, I've got a letter that we're sending around and to the speaker to say, hey, we've got to get serious about codifying the executive orders. And why is that important to your question? An executive order is something the president does with the stroke of the pen, but it's not permanent. So the next president can easily unwind or undo that executive order. So the president has been acting swiftly and aggressively to fix some of the problems we have legislatively, but now Congress has to come back behind him and codify it. Meaning make it a law. And that's much more difficult to undo as you go forward. But now the problem is that we're racing the clock. We have the 2026 elections come up. We have the midterms. There's no guarantee the Republicans will still be in control. I think we will be. But that being said, we are racing the clock. And that's the point of my letter. I'm not attacking the speaker. He's a good man. He's a friend of mine. But we've got to get serious of beginning to move these pieces of legislation through committee, get them to rules, the committee of jurisdiction, get them to the rules committee, get them to the House floor so we can send them over to the Senate and then to the White House, to President Trump, to get them signed. So there is a process, but it takes time. And the biggest commodity that's really working against us up here, whether it's reconciliation, the debt, interest rates, codifying the executive orders, all of that has to do with the clock and the fact that we don't have a lot of time before election season is right upon us.
And once you're done with that avalanche of agenda right now, you're diving right into the fiscal year 2026 budget. So
that's right.
In addition to starting to run for re-election again, as there's only 2 years per term for members of the House of Representatives, busy times, we're here for it. You caught us up on everything, Congressman. Always a pleasure catching up with you. We've got everything live linked in our show description today, including links to your congressional website. People can sign up for your newsletter, see all the work you're doing at home and abroad. Where can we find you on social media? We'll live link that as well.
Yeah, you can go to Rep. Ogles or to at Andy Ogles. If you want to see footage of us at the prison, photographs of us, with the president, it's all up there on social media. And it's really, it's a stark contrast of seeing these individuals who have literally killed dozens of people. They're guilty of some of the most heinous crimes. I mean, one of the MS-13 members, admitted to child sacrifice. I mean, these are the types of people that are being deported, and you can see footage of all of that on at Rep. Ogles or at Andy Ogles.
This guy's doing a hell of a job up there on Capitol Hill and beyond. This is the man representing Tennessee 5 out there fighting for all of America first. Representative Andy Ogles, thanks for joining us on the show today. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, busy start to the week. Not as busy for us as it has been for President Trump, but as always, I think we nailed it. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast and want to hear the now nearly 590 other editions of the show, you best be subscribed to us across every downloadable podcasting platform. Find us anywhere. We prefer Apple and Spotify. Check out our new YouTube channels as well, and then check us out on social media. Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, Instagram, and TikTok is where we have accounts. Find us, follow us, hit the notification bell. You'll never miss out on all the great stuff we've got going on down here. At Steak for Breakfast, we want to thank all of our guests for coming in and sharing with us today. Pennsylvania Congressman Scott Perry, North Carolina Congressman Brad Scott, Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett, and Tennessee Congressman Andy Ogles. You guys all helped make Steak great again. Guys, guess what? It's going to be a busy week moving forward. Got a lot of stuff going on up on Capitol Hill. Got President Trump on the next 2 legs, maybe 3, of his historic trip to the Middle East and everything in between. Lucky for you guys, we're here for it. Guest list is materializing, but don't worry. Never fear. We've got you covered. So far confirmed, Indiana Congresswoman Victoria Spartz and North Carolina Congressman Mark Harris will be here. We'll see who else wants to jump in. So on behalf of the pod team, I'm Roan. Thanks for listening. Have a great rest of your week, America First, and take care.